Hello everyone, today we're going to look at the causes of the French Revolution, and we already did start to look at this a little bit already. So when you get this screen, you might want to pause it when it fully comes up so that you have time to write down your objectives. What they are is to evaluate the role of the French social class structure in causing the revolution in France, to analyze the short-term causes of the French Revolution, and to analyze the long-term causes of the French Revolution. The new framework for social studies is very big on this, the fact that you recognize short-term and long-term causes of the French Revolution. So we are going to spend time kind of sorting out what those mean, short-term versus long-term, and we'll talk more about that in class. If you need more time, you better pause it here. Otherwise, we're going to move on. We talked about first, for the causes of the French Revolution, the fact that there were social inequities in France. And inequities means that there were things that were not equal. So we looked first at the old regime, the fact that there was a king and a queen who had ruled over the system of feudalism all the way from the Middle Ages, and these last vestiges of the old regime were still in place under this old regime. So the French people were divided into a social class structure called the estate system. And there were three estates in this structure. The first estate was the clergy, that's your church and religious leaders, 1% of the population who controlled up to about 20% of all the land in France. They collected tithes, which were religious taxes, and they paid no taxes. The second estate were nobles, who were 2% of the population, owned 20% of the land, and paid almost no taxes and had the best jobs in society. So these things frustrated the people who we'll talk about next. And, when we get into the next group that we'll talk about, you see that the frustration level of the people is pretty high. And you can understand why. So you look at those people that we've just talked about, the people who control the majority of the wealth, the land, paying the least amount of taxes in the society, and you're bound to have some people who are very, very angry. So when we look at this next group, who felt the real wrath of these social inequities and felt how harsh they were firsthand, and again, once it all comes up, you might want to pause it so that you have time to take it all down. But the third estate made up 97% of the population of France, and three different diverse groups were the ones who formed this third estate. You had the bourgeoisie, who were the middle-class citizens, and they were primarily your merchants, meaning your businessmen, and your artisans, meaning your craftspeople. Then you had the workers, who were the cooks, servants, and other low-level workers who made low wages, pause it if you need, and the peasants, 80% of the population, who were the most heavily taxed. So that is the consistent pieces of the third estate. All of these groups were frustrated with their low status and the fact that they were forced to pay all of the taxes. We're going to look quickly at a political cartoon. We see that there is clearly the third estate is the man who's got the first and second estate people riding on his back. So it shows exactly how unfair this structure really is. And it's a political cartoon of the time. So it shows you the frustration that's building up on the part of the French people. Okay, that social class structure that we just spoke about is part of the long-term causes that are going to lead up to the French Revolution. So looking at this, again, once it comes up, you may want to pause it so that you have time to write it down, and then start it again once you've written things down. Okay, and then you can kind of hear me talking about it as well. So in terms of long-term causes, we have what we just talked about, which is the social class structure, the economic injustices of that old regime, the things that they were doing that were not fair to the people of France. The next thing we have is the fact that the American Revolution, ironically with the help of the French government, Louis XVI, was a great example for the French people of a successful revolution. It helped them believe that these Enlightenment ideas that they were grabbing onto, the liberty and equality that are going to become the slogan of the revolution, are fermenting in their minds, so to speak, and they are starting to realize that the Americans were successful. Why couldn't they be? So these ideas weren't new. They had been in France, and they were starting to really agitate the people towards revolution. We're going to look next at a man called Abbé Sieyès. He is a person who felt that the third estate was infinitely more important than it was looked at by the first and second estate. And so he was a clergyman, actually, which is kind of interesting. An abbé typically is a clergyman. And he felt that the third estate was everything, and that really what they had been held in now up to the political order, they were nothing. He was saying that they should demand to become something in that system. So Abbé Sieyès was a clergyman, again, sympathetic to the cause of the poor people in the third estate. Okay, now, these long-term causes are fermenting. They're getting people going, and they're angrier and angrier, ready to kind of pounce and act on their actions. But then several things happen that are more immediate causes, that are things that are right then and there causing them to say enough is enough and really go against their government. The first thing that we'll look at is called deficit spending. The king was spending tremendous amounts of money, particularly his wife, on extravagant things that they didn't necessarily even need, and wars that were drowning and killing the French treasury. So the people were very angry about this deficit spending because governments raise money by taxes. On top of that, the peasants are paying more taxes to do this deficit spending, and then there's poor harvests several years in a row, which makes the food prices rise and leads to a famine among the third estate. So they are angry, angry, angry. And while they're in these horrible situations, Louis XVI proves to be weak, absolutely awful monarch who fails to change things for the better for those peasants. Again, he should have paused. But they're frustrated with him because he has married this Austrian woman, Marie Antoinette, who is not a French woman, obviously, and they're angry about that. But they're also angry because of her lavish spending and the fact that she's having these parties and hosting people and all of these things while they are literally starving. So immediate causes, that's what we're looking at, the deficit spending. The fact that they were going to pay more and more in taxes that they did not have. Okay, so what do these peasants decide they're going to do? Peasants, businessmen, right? And the workers, what are these people going to do? So what events actually lead up to this revolution? The king has to figure out a way to make more money. He's frustrated because his treasury is just broke. He has nothing, and the people, particularly the nobles and the clergy, are not willing to pay more taxes. So he's forced to call a meeting of the Estates General. And again, pause it if you think you're going to need it. We call this meeting of the Estates General, which is where all three estates get together and representatives meet and they discuss problems and they vote on them. The third estate said, we want to meet all at once, or we'll definitely be outvoted, even though they probably would have been outvoted anyway. When the other two estates laughed them off and refused, the third estate formed a national assembly and said, we're meeting by ourselves, and they started to write a constitution. They were locked out of the proceedings by the first and second estate, and so they broke into the king's indoor tennis court and took what they called the tennis court oath, saying they would not leave without a new constitution for the state of France that felt and showed the interests of the third estate. And so these things are high treason, essentially, because they're basically saying we won't listen to the king and his lackeys anymore. We're going to do things by ourselves. And so I'm going to show you a couple of pictures that depict, first off, what a meeting of the Estates General looked like and where it took place. So take a look at that, and that's where they were to meet. It was a large group, but each estate still only had one vote. And this is the indoor tennis court where the third estate went in and set up the National Assembly. Now, kind of emboldened by the third estate and what they did with the National Assembly, you're going to see that Louis is going to try to make peace with the third estate. He's going to say to the National Assembly whatever you want. He ordered the noble and the clergy to join the third estate, and he didn't really trust his own soldiers anymore. He actually got some Swiss guards to act as mercenaries for him. So you might want to pause this to write it down. What happens is there was these rumors that started that said that these foreign troops that he had brought in were going to kill off French people, and that the only way that they could save each other was the only way they could save each other was to get weapons. So they go and they storm the Bastille, which is an old fortress that was used as a prison and that they felt was a place where political prisoners were kept. They go there, they ask for the weapons, and they are actually able to take over the Bastille from the French troops guarding it. And the storming of the Bastille is a symbol of that French Revolution. July 14th in France is still Bastille Day. It's celebrated very similar to July 4th in the United States. So the storming of the Bastille is symbolic of the fact that the French people were no longer willing to live under their king. Now, that is bad news for Louis the 16th, because Louis is, happily married and living in luxury and just can't handle these people. That's him with his Queen Marie Antoinette and their wedding. So, painting of the storming of the Bastille. And basically what Louis the 16th is facing at this point is the French Revolution. Okay, and you see there the tricolor, the blue, white, red colors of the French Rev. And that's where we'll leave it. I thank you for your patience, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.